The Washington Wizards' current record is 3 wins and 8 losses, the third worst in the Eastern Conference so far. Russell Westbrook is having a bad start to the year and now out for a week because of a quad injury. Bradley Beal is having an amazing start to the year, and I think they've played enough games to where we can go over some trends as a duo and how it helps and hurts the Wizards team. I'm one of the people that thought Westbrook and Beal were good enough to get this Wizards team to make a run at one of the lower playoff seeds. It is early, but they haven't looked good together so far. I never thought they would win a playoff series, but I thought they'd be more competitive in the beginning of the year, but at the moment they are not. I definitely did not recognize that Wizards team that won by double digits over Phoenix the other day, but I'll talk about it near the end of the video. Before Westbrook sat out because of his thigh injury, the Wizards were second in the NBA in assists, and that's largely due to Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook being able to demand attention, manipulate defenses with their dribble, and find shooters and players at the rim. That's something I thought they could do well when the trade was made, and it's mostly happened. Also, at the time of this video, the Wizards are 7th in 3-point percentage. Before the season, I did think this team had some potential as a pretty good 3-point shooting team when you factor in Davis Bertans, Thomas Bryant, and others next to Bradley Beal and Russ. Denny Avdia and Raul Neto have also contributed to their 3-point shooting success. Russ and Beal are combining for 54 points per game, which is one of the more higher scoring duos in the league. That's mostly because of Bradley Beal having one of the better stretches of his career. Westbrook is averaging only 20 points per game. Now, are total assists, points per game between a duo and 3-point percentage a good indicator of an elite offense? Not exactly, but they've been pretty good. Before Westbrook went down with that injury, the Wizards were the 11th ranked offense. So the things I'd say this duo will continue to be good at when Russ comes back from his injury is demanding attention from defenses, finding 3-point shooters, and creating an above average team offense. I never really thought about which teams have the worst defending point guard and shooting guard backcourt, but if not for Kobe White and Zach LaVine, Brad Beal and Russell Westbrook would be in the running for the worst backcourt defense. Russ's defense off the ball is so miserable, like I can't even believe some of the stuff he does. That game against Orlando, he had a play where he blew multiple assignments on switches that let Markelle Fultz get to the rim. I just could not believe what was happening. It's so frustrating watching him freelance on defense. Brad Beal also isn't good on defense. He doesn't freelance like Russ, but compared to other NBA players, he is kinda small, so a bigger shooting guard or small forward can bully him and seal him off. And he's not that great of a pick and roll defender as well. He doesn't really bring it effort-wise every time down the court. They didn't play defense at all last year, and all they did was add Westbrook into the rotation this year, so it's basically the same problem as it was last year. Another thing Westbrook and Beal don't do well together is take care of the ball. Westbrook is a turnover machine, and Beal only averages about 5 assists per game and turns it over an average of 4 times. That's definitely not good. Beal and Westbrook both, and let me emphasize both, need to be all NBA playmakers at the same time on the court to make up for the rest of the roster's deficiencies. Head coach Scott Brooks has been called the worst coach in the league, and I'd probably agree. It's a fun game seeing what Scott Brooks comes up with every night. What he asks of his guys on defense is honestly hilarious. Brooks is throwing out those 3-guard lineups that get destroyed and making untimely substitutions. But funny enough, since Westbrook was out against Phoenix, it forced Brooks to go with some different lineups. He had more size and shooting on the perimeter and in the front court. He could have done that when Russ was resting. I'm not sure what happened, but the team looks better. The Wizards were switching on almost every single defensive possession. To be fair, Scott Brooks isn't working with much, but these guys have no effort or intensity on defense. Defensive communication does not exist in DC, and part of that is coaching. And the final bad thing, this team last year was a trash rebounding team, and guess what? They are still bad at rebounding. Westbrook being a better rebounder than some of the power forwards on this team is a problem, and I'm not talking about individual rebounding numbers. Beal obviously isn't a rebounder. I talked about them as a duo, now I just want to talk about them individually. I've seen some of the early plus-minus numbers with Westbrook about like a couple games ago. If you haven't seen them, basically they were really bad without Russ on the floor and slightly positive with him on the floor. But he's had a lot of fourth quarter turnovers and missed defensive assignments that could have won them maybe 2 extra games. Serious question, and I'm not trying to like dunk on Russ because obviously he's a little bit injured, but since 2017, what has been his new trick or his new development for when he ages? Where has he adapted? He's been injured a lot, so that puts him out of time in the gym, but what is his next skill in the future? Most great players when they get older focus on something else, but Russ has been the exact same guy every year, except he's declining in the worst ways a high usage player should. Part of why his efficiency numbers are down is because he can't make a free throw like he could 3 years ago, and he's not getting to the line like he did 3 years ago. Out of nowhere, he went from an 80% free throw guy to a 65% free throw shooter consistently. It's pretty crazy. I don't even know what he's doing out there sometimes. He will like slow dribble and stare at the guy guarding him before taking a jump shot or posting up. Now, to be fair, I don't think he is this bad shooting efficiency wise. He clearly was favoring the same injury from the bubble. The short offseason was going to be a disadvantage for some players. I wonder if that's why Scott Brooks wasn't having Russ run pick and rolls and having him post up more. In the past, Russ was good enough individually where he could overcome Scott Brooks' bad decision making, but now I don't think that's possible. To be fair, there's not as much spacing in Washington, but it doesn't help that he needs a similar situation to Houston to make up for his lack of three-point shooting. It might be as simple as Westbrook being 32 years old in his 13th year. Not everyone can be LeBron. He's had a lot of injuries in his career. Because he's not that fierce rim attacker like he once was, he has to settle for jumpers and three-pointers, and we know that's what defenses want him to shoot. Funny enough, he is shooting pretty well from the mid-range this year. He's obviously not totally responsible for the Wizards' current record, but he hasn't helped. I don't know how many Wizards games I can watch once he comes back. I hope he looks better when he gets back from the quad injury. Moving on to Bradley Beal, he is leading the league in scoring, averaging 36 points per game, and it doesn't even matter because the Wizards are just losing games. He's 27 years old, in the prime of his career, and he's another one of those guys who is just so good at scoring when he's off balance. Some of the shots he is hitting is just nuts. As ridiculous as a scorer as he's been, he's not good enough to where you can go to a second round series with a below average roster. Most guys aren't. You can ask him to score 35, but he's not someone who leads an offense with his passing and gets everybody involved. He needs someone else to do that for him. Bradley Beal is a tough cover when moving off the ball, and he is shooting a crazy percentage on mid-range shots so far. When he gets traded, it's going to be big because he can play in any type of offense. He's really adaptable. If Beal is ever on a different team and they are really good, you want him to be that 1B option surrounded by defenders. It's too much for a 6'3" guy that only averages about 5 assists per game to lead an offense. Now, I'm going to mention it at the end. This part could have been in the good things section, but this bad start to the season might be a blessing in disguise for the Wizards long term. This team currently constructed is obviously not competing for a championship. I see a lot of people mentioning that even though it's been only 10 or so games, the Rockets won the trade. John Wall has been a lot better than Russ, looks a lot faster, playing better defense. But even if Wall was on this team with Beal, they weren't making a conference finals. Maybe they are 4-7 with Wall in place of Westbrook, but does that really mean anything? The rebuild was staring them in the face when John Wall got injured for a season. The front office was delaying the inevitable when they traded for Westbrook, and guess what? The rebuild is back staring at them in the face in 2021. Reality has set in for the organization and the fans. Everyone knows the deal. It's time to explore Bradley Beal trades. Try to model your future like the Knicks, the Thunder, and the Cavs. Get some young prospects to develop while Westbrook will be the commander of the tank. You have Denny Avdia, who looks really good when he gets the ball. He creates a lot of scoring opportunities. Now find some other players to fit in a lineup with him. Also fire Scott Brooks before he ruins his development. I think the Wizards' issues on the basketball court are pretty self-explanatory. Most of the roster is unproven and undisciplined on both sides of the court, especially on defense. Their roster was trash last year, and they got a little better this year adding Westbrook and Denny. I had expectations that this team would be more competitive, and they did look competitive against the Suns, but clearly I had too high of expectations of the Westbrook and Beal duo. There's no reason to deflect or try to come up with this or that to make sense of it. When you have a bad coach and mostly below average roster, this is what happens.